My name is Celeste. I'm 38 years old. People sometimes ask me about my childhood, usually in casual conversation at work or over drinks, expecting funny stories about siblings or warm memories of family game nights. I've gotten very good at changing the subject. It wasn't that my childhood was a horror story. I had food, a roof, clothes that fit. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family. But if you look closely at a picture long enough, you start to notice who's in focus and who's blurred out at the edge. I was always the blur. The moment everything tilted off, its axis happened when I was 8. One night I woke to the sound of my mother's panicked voice and the slam of the front door. Amanda, my baby sister, had decided to arrive weeks early. My father rushed my mother to the hospital while my Aunt Jennifer hurried over to stay with me. I remember sitting on the sofa in my pajamas, my bare feet tucked under me, the house too quiet now that the chaos had left with them. Aunt Jennifer tried to distract me with cartoons and hot chocolate, but every time the phone rang, her eyes darted to it like it was a bomb. I didn't understand what premature meant, but I understood the way grown-ups spoke in half-sentences and lowered voices, how they went suddenly still when they thought you weren't listening. Something was wrong with the baby, that much even an 8-year-old could feel. Amanda survived. Fragile, tiny, always wrapped in layers of blankets like a delicate glass figurine that might shatter if you breathed too hard. When my parents brought her home, our house changed overnight. The living room turned into a mini hospital. Machines, special bottles, a constant rotation of wipes and thermometers. My mother scoured every surface with disinfectant until the sharp chemical smell seemed to live in my nose. "If you so much as sniffle, you're going to Grandma's," she warned me more than once, eyes fixed on Amanda's sleeping form. "We can't take any chances with your sister." For a while, being sent away felt like an adventure. Grandma would feed me overcooked pasta and let me stay up late watching old movies. Aunt Jennifer would slip me little gifts, hair clips, cheap bracelets, a book she thought I'd like, and say things like, "You know you're important too, right?" in a quiet voice that made my chest tighten. But visits turned into exile. A slight cough, a runny nose, even a classmate having the flu was enough for my mother to say, "Pack a bag, Celeste. You're staying at Grandma's for a few days." It became obvious that I wasn't being protected. I was being removed, like a risk factor to be managed. I learned quickly that the surest way to get any scrap of attention was to be useful or impressive. So I excelled. I did my homework without being told. I read ahead in textbooks. I joined the debate team, the science club, anything that might make my parents look at me and see more than the older one who can take care of herself. In 6th grade, I won the school science fair. I stayed up late for weeks building a model of the solar system, painting tiny planets, memorizing distances and facts. When they called my name and handed me the trophy, my heart pounded with a fizzy, glowing hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this would be the thing that finally made them proud of me. I ran home, trophy clutched in both hands, nearly slipping on the front steps. My mother was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter for the 3rd time. "Mom, look!" I burst out, holding the trophy up like a golden ticket. "I won the science fair." She glanced up barely. "That's nice, dear. Did you wash your hands?" Amanda's been feeling a little under the weather. The trophy suddenly felt heavier. I just got home. I wanted to show you." "Please, Celeste," she snapped, more sharply than the situation deserved. "Go wash your hands first. If Amanda gets sick, you know what could happen." I stood there for a second, my triumph dissolving into something small and ashamed, then did what I always did. I washed my hands and scrubbed until my fingers hurt. When I came back, my mother was leaning over Amanda's crib, murmuring to her. She didn't ask to see the trophy. That was the pattern. My report cards had straight A's. Amanda had a runny nose. Guess which one got a family meeting? I placed medals and certificates on the dining table. They were pushed aside to make room for Amanda's medicine schedule. By the time Amanda turned 7, she had outgrown most of her health issues. The doctors were no longer using words like crucial and critical. She ran around the yard without gasping, went to school like any other kid. But my parents stayed stuck in the past, locked into a habit of seeing her as breakable, special, priority number 1. They didn't know how to stop. Amanda noticed. Children always notice power, especially when they have it. One afternoon, my science teacher called my parents in for a meeting. He told them I had a real shot at a scholarship someday if I kept up my grades and extracurriculars. I sat there, my cheeks hot, half embarrassed, half thrilled. Dad nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment, I saw something like pride flicker across his face. Then Mom's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, and her posture changed instantly. "It's the babysitter," she whispered, already standing. "Amanda's at home." She answered, voice tense. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I could faintly hear Amanda's dramatic sobs through the receiver. "I can't find my favorite pen for homework. The one Celeste gave me is awful." Just like that, the oxygen left the room. "We have to go," Mom told my teacher, already scooping up her bag. "She's upset, you understand." "But we were just," my teacher started. "Another time," Dad said, apologetic, but already halfway out the door behind her. On the drive home, I stared out the window, my scholarship potential shrinking to the size of a misplaced pen. After that, they stopped coming to my events altogether. "It's just easier this way," Mom said once when I asked, trying not to sound desperate. "Amanda gets upset when she feels left out." When I won the state debate championship, I carried the heavy trophy home like contraband. Mom took one look at it, bit her lip, and slipped it quietly into a drawer. "Amanda doesn't like seeing other people's awards," she explained. "You know how sensitive she is." I stood there in the hallway, watching the drawer close on proof that I was good at something, feeling like the universe was confirming a rule. If it makes Amanda uncomfortable, it disappears. Sometimes, late at night, I lay in bed and replayed the day in my head. I'd think about Grandma's warm, wrinkled hands stroking my hair, about Aunt Jennifer's quiet, "You mattered long before you were useful," as she handed me a book. Then I'd remember Mom's eyes sliding right past me to land on Amanda, and this heavy, wordless question would press down on my chest. What did I do wrong by simply being the first child? I wish I could tell you I turned into some saint of patience and understanding. The truth is uglier. I started to resent Amanda, not just for existing, but for the way she learned to twist her mouth into a pout at exactly the right moment, to clutch her chest and say she felt funny whenever she didn't get what she wanted. Every time she choked out a fake sob and my parents rushed in, some small, hard part of me snapped a little more. High school was supposed to be my moment. I doubled down on the only strategy that had ever given me any sense of control: achievement. Advanced classes, clubs, competitions. My guidance counselor talked to me about college like it was a given, like my future stretched out in front of me, full of possibilities. At home, the conversation was always about Amanda, her stress, her feelings, her latest minor drama that swallowed all available air. Some nights, I imagined standing in the middle of the living room and screaming, just to see if anyone would look at me the way they looked at her when she so much as sneezed. I never did. Instead, I became the quiet, competent one, the one who didn't make trouble, the one who could be safely ignored. When the acceptance letter from state arrived, I opened it alone at the kitchen table. Full ride scholarship, tuition and living expenses covered. For a second, my hands shook so hard I could barely read the words. This wasn't just "you're smart." This wasn't just a line on a resume. This was a ticket out. That night at dinner, I placed the letter neatly beside my plate. "I got in," I said, trying to sound calm. "I got a full scholarship to state. Everything's covered." Dad smiled distractedly. "That's good, honey. Pass the salt?" Before I could swallow the lump in my throat, Amanda rolled her eyes and stabbed at her food with her fork. "Finally," she said, not looking at me. "You can move out. I'm turning your room into my gaming setup. I want 3 monitors and a streaming rig." Mom chuckled like it was a cute joke. "We'll see," she murmured, already picturing where Amanda's things would go. I stared at my plate, at the acceptance letter half hidden beneath a napkin, and realized something ridiculously simple and completely devastating. I was not leaving home as a celebrated success. I was being cleared out to make more room for Amanda. That night, in bed, I opened my calendar and counted the days until move-in. 91. 91 days, until I could breathe without the scent of disinfectant and favoritism in my lungs. 91 days, until my life belonged to me, even if no one else was excited about it. I didn't know it then, but every quiet yes I'd given, every time I'd swallowed my hurt and kept going, was laying dry kindling around my feet. All it would take, years later, was one holiday dinner and one opened laptop for the whole pile to go up in flames. College wasn't freedom the way movies make it seem. It was quieter, lonelier, a place where I finally had space to hear my own thoughts without them being drowned out by Amanda's needs. After years of being the reliable background child, anonymity felt strangely luxurious. No one knew who I was supposed to be. No one expected me to disappear so someone else could shine. I could just exist. But I still went home on weekends for the obligatory family dinners. Mom insisted on it, saying things like, "You know Amanda misses you," even though Amanda barely acknowledged me between mouthfuls of pasta while she updated everyone on her latest middle school drama. I'd sit at the table, nodding politely, trying not to notice the way every conversation orbited her like she was gravity itself. By the time I graduated at 23, I'd perfected the art of smallness. Even my happiness felt like something I needed to fold neatly and tuck into a drawer so no one would trip over it. When I landed my first job, managerial role at Thompson and Company, I bought a tiny apartment with peeling paint but decent lighting. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My own plates, my own schedule, my own silence. I decorated it slowly, one thrift store piece at a time, savoring the feeling of having something no one could take or redirect for Amanda's comfort. The salary wasn't glamorous, just enough to keep the lights on and buy cheap noodles, but after years of being a background character in my own home, the independence felt intoxicating. For the first time, no one could send me away or hide my accomplishments in a drawer. No one could erase me. One night after work, I was scrolling through social media when an ad popped up, "Learn how to make your money work for you." Normally, I rolled my eyes at those things, but something about it snagged at me. Maybe it was the restlessness I'd been ignoring, or the memory of Mom crying over medical bills when I was 8, or how Amanda's private school tuition had nearly crushed them years later. Maybe I was just tired of pretending my paycheck made me safe. The course fee made me wince. Paying for it meant eating instant noodles for weeks. But I did it anyway. That course changed everything. The instructor, Matthew, was the first person who ever made investing sound less like a rich man's game and more like a system you could learn with discipline. He explained things simply: market cycles, risk management, position sizing. I started tiny, putting a couple $100s into tech stocks. I checked the charts obsessively, refreshing even when the numbers barely moved. My first win was almost stupidly lucky. A small AI company no one was talking about suddenly exploded in value. I watched my $375 turn into $3,500 in a matter of months, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. A biotech stock tripled next. I was hooked, but not careless, because right after those wins, I made my first real mistake. One night, fueled by adrenaline and overconfidence, I took a friend's hot tip and put too much into a penny stock. The next morning, half of it evaporated. It wasn't catastrophic, but the sting of watching money disappear was enough to shock me back into discipline. I spent nights studying volatility charts, reading books Matthew recommended, running mock trades. If I was going to make money, it wouldn't be luck, it would be skill. As the months passed, my side income grew quietly, like a hidden current pulling me away from the shore of corporate life. Some days, I made more before breakfast than I did all week at Thompson. I remember one specific moment, sitting at my desk during a mind-numbing meeting, pretending to care about quarterly reports, when a notification flashed on my phone. One of my stocks hit my target price. I opened the trading app under the table, ran the numbers, realized my investment gains had tripled my yearly salary. A strange calm washed over me. I looked around the conference room at my coworkers arguing about printer ink budgets, and this quiet, steady thought rose in me. I don't need this job anymore. That night, in my dim apartment with the humming AC and the city lights leaking through the thin curtains, I drafted my resignation letter. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of stepping into a version of myself I'd never been allowed to be. I didn't tell my family I quit. Let them think I was still pushing papers. Let them assume I was average. Being underestimated had become my shield. If they didn't know who I was becoming, they couldn't belittle it, steal it, or twist it to fit their idea of what Amanda deserved. Even after I left Thompson, I still attended the Saturday family dinners. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of an old, pathetic hope that if I showed up enough times, someday Mom might finally ask how I was doing, without quickly following up with, "Anyway, back to Amanda." Dinner was always the same: Mom's mediocre chicken, Amanda's endless stories about Carleton University and how everyone else had actual wealth, Dad's eyes shining with pride as she talked about clubs and internships she didn't get but pretended she was far too good for. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed silently in my lap. Markets open on the other side of the world, my investments building a life none of them had the slightest clue about. Sometimes Mom would ask, "You're still working at Thompson's, right, honey?" without waiting for the answer. I'd smile, nod, sip my water. The truth would have meant nothing to them anyway. They only heard what confirmed their beliefs. It was easier to let them think I was ordinary. To let them talk about how Amanda was destined for greatness while I played the role of the stable, unremarkable older daughter. The irony, of course, is that I was growing richer by the week. But I said nothing. Silence had been my oldest survival skill. I didn't realize that silence was also a fuse, and someday it would lead straight into the heart of a Thanksgiving bombshell no one would ever forget. Amanda's acceptance into Carleton University was treated like a national holiday. Mom printed the acceptance letter and framed it. Dad took a day off work to process the joy. Relatives were called, aunts cried, cousins congratulated her as if she'd been elected president. I remember sitting at the side of the living room, sipping tea, watching the celebration unfold like a performance I had never been cast in. "It's a huge cost," Mom sighed theatrically during one family dinner, though the corners of her mouth were tugged upward with pride. "But Amanda deserves the best." Amanda twirled her pasta. "My roommate has a Gucci backpack. Everyone there comes from such wealthy families." The implication slid easily into the room. Our family didn't measure up, and she was suffering because of it. What no one said out loud, but everyone understood, was that they would do whatever it took to maintain Amanda's image, even if it meant drowning. A few months later, I walked in on Mom at the kitchen table surrounded by bills. She didn't notice me at first. She was too busy rubbing her temples, her hair frizzy from stress. Dad was hunched beside her, going through pages of property taxes. "They increased again," he muttered, voice tight. "And with Amanda's tuition." Mom let out a thin, shaky breath. "We'll manage. We always do." I'd heard those words before, years ago, late at night when Amanda was a newborn and the hospital bills kept arriving. Back then, I'd felt like a ghost hovering in doorways, catching pieces of adult fear and not knowing what to do with it. This time, I was older, wealthier, and my heart felt heavier because of it. That night, without telling them, I set up an automatic transfer, $2,000 a month straight into their account. When I told Mom the next day, her reaction startled me. She stood there for a moment, blinking, then rushed toward me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders. A full, warm hug. The first one I could remember since Amanda's infancy. "Oh, Celeste," she murmured, "this will help so much." I tried to ignore this small, foolish flicker of hope that bloomed in me, like maybe this was the moment things shifted. But hope is a fragile thing. Later that same week, after another family dinner where everyone talked about Amanda's important new connections in student government, I got up to grab a glass of water and froze in the hallway when I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen. "We should give some of Celeste's money to Amanda," Mom said matter-of-factly, stacking plates. "At least $400 or $500. Poor thing feels so out of place surrounded by rich students." Dad didn't even hesitate. "Good idea. She needs to maintain appearances. Maybe she can finally get that designer bag she's been eyeing." I stood completely still, invisible in the same house I grew up in. That hug, it wasn't about me. It was about what I could provide. I didn't storm in. I didn't confront them. I just stood in the hallway, listening to my parents plan how to redistribute the money I gave them. Money they never asked how I earned. Money they assumed came from a humble little manager job. They didn't want my success. They wanted access to it. Maybe that was the moment something inside me began to shift, quietly, like a tectonic plate slipping beneath another. By the time I turned 29, my investments had reached a level I never imagined possible. I wanted a place that reflected the stability I'd built, one no one could claim or taint with entitlement. After months of searching, I found it. A secure apartment with solid construction, warm, natural light, and a view that made the city feel like it belonged to me. I bought it outright. No mortgage, no debt, no strings attached. The day I got the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room, my footsteps echoing across the hardwood floors, and felt the closest thing to pride I'd ever known. A home that wasn't taken away when someone felt under the weather. A space not defined by Amanda's fragility. When I mentioned to Mom that I was moving, she didn't even pause in her shuffling of papers. "Did you find a cheaper place to rent?" she asked, distracted. "Just a different place," I said vaguely. "Better location." "Well, don't spend too much on rent, honey. You know how unstable the job market is in your field." I nearly laughed. If only she knew my field was no longer office memos, but managing investments that grew while I slept. At the next family gathering, Aunt Jennifer asked kindly, "How's the new place, Celeste?" Before I could answer, Mom jumped in, voice dismissive. "She's renting a new apartment, but wait until you hear about Amanda's big news. She's graduating at the top of her class." And just like that, my life shrank again so Amanda's could expand. Relatives nodded sympathetically at me, poor average Celeste, before turning their starry-eyed attention to Amanda. "She's going places," Dad announced proudly. "Not that we're surprised. She's always been our star." Someone muttered under their breath, unlike some people who settle for average. I didn't bother correcting them. That morning, a single stock sale had brought in more than that cousin made in a year. Explaining myself would be like shouting into a void. Then came Amanda's graduation party. Mom and Dad went all out, catered dishes, expensive decorations, fresh flowers on every table. Amanda strutted around in her cap and gown like she had single-handedly cured cancer. The whole party practically sparkled with the money I'd been sending home each month, but I kept that observation to myself. Amanda spotted me by the punch bowl and marched over, gripping her diploma like a trophy she wanted to bludgeon me with. "Look at this, Celeste," she said, shoving the parchment toward me. "Carleton University, not some state school like yours." I took a sip of my drink. "Congratulations, Amanda." "That's all you have to say?" She scoffed. "Aren't you jealous? I'm going to be so successful while you're you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence is sharper than any comeback. 3 months later, Amanda was still unemployed. Those prestigious companies she bragged about? They didn't seem particularly impressed with her degree or her sense of entitlement. Meanwhile, her student loan bills began arriving regularly. And when those bills hit, they hit hard. One evening, Mom called. I could hear the strain in her voice before she even spoke. "Celeste, do you have a minute?" I knew exactly where the conversation was going. Amanda's loan payments. They're taking a toll on us. And with all our other expenses, I hate to ask, truly, but could you possibly— "How much do you need?" I cut in, even as a familiar heaviness settled in my chest. "Well, if you could raise your monthly contribution to $3,500, it would be an absolute lifesaver." My jaw tightened. I thought about all the dinners where my achievements were ignored, all the times I was pushed aside so Amanda could shine, all the nights I'd eaten cheap noodles to afford that first investment course. But I also remembered my parents drowning in bills when I was 8. I remembered being old enough to feel their fear, but too young to do anything about it. "All right," I said finally. "Starting next month." Mom barely finished her thank you before launching into plans for the money. Loan payments, interview outfits, maybe even a new laptop for Amanda. I listened quietly, a strange numbness spreading in my chest. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a resource, something to withdraw from, something to manage, something to expect. And somewhere deep inside me, a fuse continued to burn, slow, steady, inevitable. Thanksgiving has always been a performance in my family. Mom insisting on cooking everything herself, Dad complaining loudly while secretly enjoying the chaos, Amanda bursting into melodrama over the smallest inconvenience. I usually hovered near the edges, helping where I could, trying not to get caught in the crossfire of expectations I never seemed to meet. But this year was different. A week before the holiday, Mom called me sounding oddly fragile. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she groaned. I strained my back pulling Amanda's laundry out of the dryer. I can barely stand. How am I supposed to cook for 20 people? I could picture Amanda's basket overflowing with clothes she was perfectly capable of carrying herself. I could also picture Mom bent over, determined to serve her golden child like always, even at the cost of her own spine. "That's too much for you," I said. "Let me take care of it. I'll have everything catered from that new place downtown." Mom hesitated, only for a second, before her voice brightened. "You're such a wonderful daughter. I don't know what we'd do without you." In the background of our video call, Amanda crossed her arms and rolled her eyes so dramatically it was practically a theatrical performance. A single compliment directed at me was enough to make her mood sour. The morning of Thanksgiving, the catering team arrived right on time. The food smelled incredible: herb-roasted turkey, creamy potatoes with garlic confit, warm rolls, rich gravy. And I helped Mom arrange everything on big platters to make it look homemade. She still limped slightly, but she seemed relieved to have the burden lifted. As I set out the utensils, Amanda hovered nearby, pursing her lips. "Store-bought stuffing could never compare to homemade," she muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I ignored her. I'd learned years ago that responding only fed the drama. I had brought my laptop with me since the Asian markets would open during dinner. I kept it in my old bedroom, just a sliver of privacy in a house where I'd grown up never really having any. By late afternoon, the house filled with relatives, laughing, chatting, filling their plates. The mood was warm, comfortable, and for a brief moment, I felt like maybe this would be the first holiday in years that didn't leave a bruise. Then Mom couldn't resist telling the room. I was so worried about cooking, but Celeste stepped in and arranged everything. Wasn't that thoughtful? Aunt Jennifer beamed at me. That was really generous, Celeste. I imagine it wasn't cheap. It's nothing, I said. I'm just glad everyone's enjoying it. Mom added proudly, she earns enough at that management job to help us quite a bit. Her tone held a rare warmth, misinformed warmth, but still warmth. Across the table, Amanda froze. It was subtle at first, a tiny tightening around her eyes, her fork hovering midair. But I recognized the look. It was the same one she wore as a child whenever she sensed attention drifting away from her. Then she abruptly shoved her chair back. The scraping sound sliced through the room. Everyone paused, forks halfway to their mouths. Amanda stormed out without a word. I should have known that was the beginning of the end. She returned moments later, clutching my laptop to her chest like it was a weapon. Her smirk was sharp, triumphant. Let's find out just how well Celeste is really doing, she announced, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Since she's so generous, she won't mind if I show everyone her bank balance. My blood went cold. Amanda, don't, I warned, standing. But she had already turned the screen toward the table. The banking app flashed bright against the room's warm lighting, still open from earlier. And there it was. The number. The balance of my primary investment account. 10,000. The room went silent in a way I've never experienced. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. The clock ticked once, loud, out of place, like it was intruding on a sacred moment. Amanda's face drained of color. Her hands trembled. She looked like she'd swallowed glass. Her voice cracked. To 10 million? Mom clutched her heart. Dad leaned forward, squinting like he needed to be sure that he'd read correctly. Aunt Jennifer whispered, there must be some mistake. Celeste is just a manager at Thompson. I took a breath, steady, controlled. I haven't worked at Thompson in years. Every head whipped toward me. I quit to focus on investing full-time, I said. I studied the markets. I took courses. I learned. I worked. And yes, this account has $10 million in it. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. You mean you're rich? I've been investing for a long time, I answered. I didn't hide it. None of you ever asked. The silence shattered all at once. Mom shot to her feet, face flushing an alarming shade of red. 10 million? 10 million? You've had all this money and you let us struggle? I stared at her. I send you $2,000 every month. That's nothing, she screeched. Your sister has student loans. We have bills. How could you be so selfish? Dad pointed at me, voice shaking with anger. We raised you better than this, Celeste. How dare you sit on all that money while your own family suffers? Something snapped in me, something that had been pulled taut since childhood. Oh, so saving money is a crime now? That's rich. I let out a sharp laugh. Where was any magical savings when it was time to pay for my college? Oh, right. You never saved a dime. You spent everything on Amanda. That's completely different, Mom spat. Amanda needed... No, I cut in. Amanda wanted, and you always gave. Amanda outgrew her illnesses years ago, but you stayed stuck in fragile baby mode because it made you feel needed. Amanda's eyes went glossy. Stop embarrassing me, she whispered. I turned to her. You tried to expose me as a failure. How's that working out for you? The manager you mocked ended up being the one who built something. Tell me, Amanda, how does that feel? Tears streamed down her face. The old Amanda tactic, the one that used to summon my parents instantly. But this time, I wasn't 8 years old. Mom stepped between us. If you're so successful, you should be giving us at least $10,000 a month. We're your parents. Dad nodded vigorously. It's your duty. Duty. That word hit me like a slap. I felt suddenly painfully clear. My duty ended, I said quietly, the moment you decided I didn't matter. No one breathed. Everything you've ever done, I continued, was about Amanda, her comfort, her status, her feelings. And now? You don't want me. You want my money. Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I'm done being your safety net, I said. I'm done being invisible until you need a check. I'm done. And with that, I grabbed my laptop from Amanda's shaking hands and walked out of the house I had once begged to belong in. Behind me, the shouting erupted. Mom's fury, Dad's indignation, Amanda's sobs. But I kept walking. I didn't look back. Not even once. The moment I closed my car door, the night erupted behind me, shouting, footsteps, my mother's shrill voice rising above everything. I stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding in a way that didn't feel like fear or anger. It felt like release. Like a bone that had been broken for decades had finally been snapped back into place. My phone buzzed nonstop the whole drive home. By the time I pulled into my building's garage, I had 50 missed calls, 20 voicemails, and so many texts I stopped trying to scroll through them. The first wave was pure rage. How could you do this to us? You humiliated your sister. You're ungrateful, selfish, monstrous. Then came the guilt trips. We're your family. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Amanda is devastated. Do you even care? Then the bargaining. We just need to talk calmly. Just call us back. 5 minutes. We can work this out if you apologize. Apologize. For what? For living? For succeeding? For not handing over my bank account like a second allowance? I didn't respond. I didn't trust that I could without being sucked back into the role they'd always forced me into. The dependable, invisible daughter who existed to make their lives easier. The next morning, the tone shifted again. Mom posted a long message on Facebook. A mother's heart breaks when her eldest daughter becomes wealthy and forgets her family. Please pray for Celeste so she remembers what family truly means. The comments flooded in, sympathy for her, condemnation for me. How could any daughter abandon her mother? Money really changes people. I always knew Celeste was cold. No one asked for my side. No one wondered if there was more to the story. People love tragedies where a villain is clearly marked. My mother handed them a script and they performed it flawlessly. Someone, probably a cousin, uploaded a short video clip from Thanksgiving. It showed me saying, "I'm done being your safety net," with no context, no buildup, no years of neglect behind it. Just one isolated sentence that made me look like the cruel one. I should have expected that. Seeing the video didn't even hurt. What hurt was how unsurprising it was. I opened my banking app, looked at the monthly transfers, the money I'd been sending them for years, the money they felt entitled to, the money that had become the only reason they pretended to tolerate me. With a steady hand, I canceled the automatic transfers. Then I sent one final message to Mom. I've stopped the payments. I'm done being your ATM. Do not contact me again. 1 minute later, I blocked her number. Then Dad's. Then Amanda's. Then the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, anyone who shared her post, commented on it, or sent me an accusatory text. But cutting people off digitally wasn't enough. I could feel it in my gut. They would come to me. They always came when they wanted something. So the next day, I went downstairs to speak to James, the front desk manager. I need to put some people on the do not allow in list, I told him. I gave their names, descriptions, even printed photos. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded and added them without question. I didn't expect them to show up so quickly. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was James. "Celeste, your parents and sister are in the lobby. They're trying to force their way in." I felt something sharp inside me loosen, like a rope that had been pulled tight for far too long. "What are they saying?" I asked. James exhaled. "They're yelling that you owe them money, that you're ungrateful. They're insisting they're your parents and you have to let them see you." "And you didn't let them in?" "I remembered what you asked," he said. "They're not coming upstairs." I stared at the wall of my apartment, feeling strangely calm. "Thank you, James. If they don't leave, you can call the police." I could hear their muffled shouting faintly through the phone. Mom demanding justice, Dad threatening legal action, Amanda crying theatrically about being betrayed. But it felt distant, like it was happening in a different world. In a way, it was. That night, after they finally left, I opened my laptop, not to check the markets, but to look at listings, houses in other states, apartments in cities where no one would know my name, places with mountains, or quiet beaches, or just plain anonymity. Some people would call it running away. I call it choosing peace. But then my phone buzzed, just once, an unfamiliar number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something made me look. It was Aunt Jennifer. Her message read, "I don't agree with what your parents did, but I need you to know something before you vanish completely. Your dad's blood pressure has been dangerously high since the argument. I'm not asking you to fix anything, just letting you know because I don't think anyone else will tell you the truth." I stared at the message for a long time. It didn't magically change anything. It didn't make me want to rush back. But it reminded me that the world wasn't as simple as villains and heroes. My parents weren't monsters. They were flawed, terrified, drowning people who clung to Amanda as a life raft and never noticed they were pushing me under. And I wasn't heartless, I was tired. I typed back, "Thank you for telling me. I'm not coming back right now, but I heard you, and I won't disappear completely." She replied with just one sentence, "You deserve peace, Celeste. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing it." I put my phone down and looked around my apartment. For years, I had tried to earn a place in a family that never saw me. I had twisted myself into smaller and smaller shapes just to fit into the background of their lives. I had given and given and given until they forgot I was a person at all. But money didn't change me. It revealed them, revealed what love meant to them: conditional, transactional, fragile. And in return, it revealed me to myself, capable, self-made, whole. As I scrolled through listings in faraway cities, I felt a soft, unexpected sense of relief. Not triumph, not spite. Freedom. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away, even if you're walking away from people who share your blood. Especially then,